The air in the lab had always hummed with possibility, a symphony of bubbling beakers and soft clicks from the gene sequencer, a sound Elias had come to associate with hope itself, particularly the hope for his younger sister, Anya, whose rare genetic disorder was slowly stealing her light. Beside him, always, was Victor, his best friend since they were boys scraping knees on the same asphalt, his partner in this desperate, brilliant quest, their minds a single engine fueled by shared dreams and tireless ambition, or so Elias believed, pouring his heart and soul into the complex dance of molecular biology. Late nights blurring into early mornings, fueled by cheap coffee and the certainty that they were on the cusp of something revolutionary. A therapy that could rewrite Anya's fate, and the fate of countless others, and when the pivotal breakthrough finally came, a cascade of data confirming their hypothesis, validating years of struggle and sacrifice, Elias felt a surge of elation. So profound it brought him to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he envisioned Anya running, laughing, free from the chains of her illness, and he turned to Victor, ready to share this moment of triumph, this shared victory, only to find a cold, unfamiliar glint in his friend's eyes, a calculating gaze that chillingly replaced the warmth he'd always known, and then the world fractured. It wasn't a swift, clean break, but a brutal, drawn-out shattering, starting with the inexplicable. Data corruption that wiped weeks of crucial experiments, followed by the sudden withdrawal of their primary investor, whispering darkly of unreliable results and ethical concerns, and then the final, crushing blow. Victor, sleek in a tailored suit he'd never owned before, standing at a press conference, announcing his groundbreaking discovery, his revolutionary gene therapy, presenting the very data Elias had meticulously collected, claiming the patents, the accolades the future Elias had worked for, painting Elias as a reckless, incompetent assistant who had nearly ruined his true work through negligence, leaving Elias not only stripped of his life's work and reputation but buried under a mountain of fabricated evidence, facing legal battles he couldn't afford, ostracized by the scientific community. His name a byword for failure and fraud, and worst of all, watching Anya's condition deteriorate with agonizing slowness. The hope he'd offered her snatched away, leaving him, hollowed out, a ghost haunting the edges of the life that should have been theirs. Every breath a painful reminder of Victor's treachery and his own helplessness. The once vibrant hum of the lab replaced by a deafening silence filled only with the echo of his despair and the increasingly labored sound of Anya's breathing, until one bleak morning, holding Anya's hand as she finally slipped away, her frail fingers growing cold in his, something inside Elias hardened, the crushing weight of grief, transforming into an icy resolve, a quiet, burning certainty that Victor would pay, not just for the stolen work, but for the stolen life, for the extinguished light in Anya's eyes, for the years of suffering and the death of hope. But his revenge wouldn't be swift or loud. It would be a shadow, patient and pervasive, a slow decay from within, a carefully orchestrated symphony of ruin played out over years, unseen, unheard, until the final, devastating crescendo. He disappeared, shedding the identity of the discredited scientist like a molting skin, leaving no forwarding address, no trace for the reporters still occasionally sniffing around or for the lawyers who sent final, unanswered demands. Elias was dead, replaced by a phantom who watched Victor's meteoric rise from the periphery, observing the construction of an empire built on stolen dreams. Victor Incorporated, a biotech juggernaut, celebrated as a visionary, a humanitarian, a genius who had single-handedly revolutionized medicine, his face on magazine covers, his name whispered with reverence, and Elias, from the anonymity of borrowed rooms and menial jobs that paid just enough to live and learn, studied him, not with the eyes of a broken man, but with the cold, calculating gaze of a strategist, identifying Victor's habits, his vulnerabilities, the intricate web of dependencies that held his empire together. He spent years acquiring new skills, not in the lab, but in the digital underworld, learning to navigate firewalls like cellular membranes, to exploit security lapses like genetic defects, to plant data like viral vectors, mastering the silent arts of intrusion and manipulation. He built encrypted networks, established phantom digital identities, laundered small sums of money through convoluted international channels, every step meticulous, every action measured, fueled by the quiet, persistent ache of his loss, and the vivid memory of Victor's smug smile, he knew. He couldn't simply expose Victor. Victor's narrative was too strong, his reputation too gilded, the evidence of the original theft long buried or destroyed. Victor Incorporated had layers of legal protection, public relations shields, and a board of directors fiercely loyal to their cash cow. Exposure would be a temporary scandal, easily spun away, a nuisance quickly forgotten. Elias's revenge had to be absolute, a dismantling of the very foundations of Victor's life, his career, his public image, his sanity, leaving him with nothing, less than nothing, just as Elias had been left. The plan began subtly, like a silent infection spreading through a system. Small, seemingly random data glitches appeared in Victor Incorporated's internal networks, delays in supply chain logistics that cost money but had no obvious source, minor inconsistencies in financial reports that raised eyebrows among lower-level analysts but were dismissed as human error, whispers circulated among employees, encouraged by anonymous leaks of internal memos hinting at a demanding, erratic management style from Victor, eroding his image from within, sowing seeds of doubt. Elias worked patiently, remotely unseen, each action a tiny chip in the edifice of Victor's success, observing the ripple effects, learning, adapting. Victor, from his perch of power, noticed the friction, the inefficiencies, but attributed them to the natural growing pains of a rapidly expanding company, his arrogance blinding him to the deliberate nature of the disruptions. He demanded more control, became more paranoid, unknowingly creating the perfect environment for Elias to tighten the noose. Elias didn't target the core scientific work directly. That was Victor's strength, even if stolen. He targeted the infrastructure, the finance, the public trust, the relationships that held the company together. He orchestrated minor PR nightmares, anonymous blog posts detailing unethical practices in distant subsidiaries, articles highlighting suspiciously timed stock trades by Victor's associates. Nothing substantial enough for a full investigation, but enough to create a persistent hum of unease, enough to make investors pause, to make journalists dig a little deeper. Years passed, Victor grew richer, more famous, yet the subtle pressures mounted. He began to show signs of strain. His public appearances were polished, but his eyes held a flicker of anxiety. He lashed out at employees. His inner circle started to shrink, unable to cope with his increasing volatility. Elias watched, waited, meticulously adjusting his plan. The timing was crucial. He needed to strike at the peak of Victor's vulnerability, when the external pressures Elias had orchestrated intersected with an internal crisis. That crisis came with Victor Incorporated's planned IPO, a massive public offering that would solidify Victor's legacy and make him billions. The company was valued astronomically, based largely on the promise of future therapies stemming from Victor's genius. The media hype was immense, the global financial markets were buzzing. This was the moment Victor was most exposed, most dependent on the carefully constructed image of infallibility. Elias had spent the last year preparing for this, gathering undeniable proof, not of the original theft, that was phase one, the catalyst, but of the systemic fraud, the manipulation, the rotten core of Victor Incorporated that stemmed from that initial lie. He had access to encrypted communications, offshore accounts, shell companies Victor used to hide illegal activities. He had backups of original, deleted files, timestamps, digital fingerprints Victor thought were erased forever. He even had recordings, subtly captured, of Victor admitting to questionable practices, dismissing regulations, revealing his true, ruthless nature behind closed doors. The night before the IPO, a quiet Saturday, Victor was likely celebrating, confident in his impending triumph. Elias was in a small, anonymous room, surrounded by screens, his fingers flying across keyboards. The culmination of years of planning, suffering, and cold determination was about to unfold. The first wave was digital. A coordinated release across multiple platforms, anonymous whistleblower sites, encrypted drops to investigative journalists, posts on financial forums, a deluge of data, too much to suppress, too complex to immediately discredit, detailing financial irregularities, ethical breaches, questionable clinical trial data, all meticulously cross-referenced and time-stamped. Simultaneously, automated trading algorithms Elias had subtly influenced for months triggered massive sell orders on Victor Incorporated's pre-IPO stock, creating a sudden, inexplicable panic in the private markets. Then came the more personal touch. Encrypted messages sent to key board members, major investors, even members of Victor's family, containing snippets of the most damning evidence, enough to shatter trust, sow doubt, and ignite fear of impending legal repercussions and public disgrace. The carefully constructed facade began to crumble before the market even opened on Monday. Monday morning was chaos. The IPO was halted indefinitely as regulatory bodies launched investigations, stock prices plummeted, board members resigned en masse, lawsuits were filed from every direction. Victor Incorporated was in freefall, its value evaporating by the minute, but the final act of Elias's revenge wasn't just financial or legal. It was a dismantling of identity, a public stripping bare of the man who had stolen everything. A carefully edited documentary, created by Elias using leaked internal footage, private recordings, and interviews with disgruntled former employees, subtly guided towards journalists Elias trusted, was released online, going viral instantly. It didn't just accuse Victor of past theft. It painted a chilling portrait of a pathological liar, a ruthless opportunist who had built his empire on fraud and exploited everyone around him, showing Victor's hypocrisy, his cruelty, his utter lack of empathy. It exposed not just the stolen science, but the subsequent layers of deceit, the lives he had ruined, the regulations he had flaunted, the foundation of lies his fame rested upon. The crescendo came when, in the midst of the media frenzy, the regulatory investigations, and the collapse of his company, Elias made his final move, not as the avenging ghost, but as the true scientist he had always been. Through a legitimate, respected research institution he had quietly collaborated with, he announced a breakthrough, the perfected gene therapy for Anya's disease, refined over years of solitary work, clinically proven, and offered freely to the public, a genuine act of humanity, contrasting starkly with the greed and deception of Victor. Simultaneously, a final, anonymous package arrived at the offices of major news outlets, containing the original, irrefutable lab notebooks, data logs, and communications proving Elias's ownership of the initial discovery, timestamps, digital signatures, cross-referenced with Victor's stolen data, undeniable evidence that the foundation of Victor's empire was a lie. The timing was exquisite, devastating. As Victor was being publicly crucified, stripped of his wealth, his reputation, his freedom likely gone forever, Elias emerged, not seeking fame or fortune for himself, but offering the cure Victor had denied the world, a stark, irrefutable testament to who the real visionary, the real humanitarian, had been all along. Victor was ruined, his company dissolved, his name synonymous with fraud and betrayal, facing multiple criminal investigations and civil lawsuits, his public image shattered, his life's work, built on a lie, utterly worthless, his arrogance, his greed, his belief that he was untouchable, had been his undoing, meticulously exploited by the man he had tried to erase. Elias, watching from a distance as Victor's world imploded, felt a sense of profound, cold satisfaction, not the burning rage of revenge he had expected, but a quiet, settling peace. Justice had been served, the scales balanced, not with violence, but with truth, patience, and cunning. He had not just taken back what was stolen. He had dismantled the thief's entire existence, leaving him with nothing but the ruins of his own making, a shadow of a man haunted by the ghost of the life he had stolen, while Elias, finally free from the weight of his past, his sister's memory honored by the cure he had delivered, turned his gaze towards a future built on integrity. His heart perhaps not fully healed, but his spirit whole, the silent, relentless bloom of his revenge complete.